My name is Evan Ward, and the night that changed everything began like a performance written for an audience that never bothered to see me. The mansion's ballroom gleamed under crystal chandeliers, marble floors catching the flash of cameras, and valet-parked cars lined the drive like obedient soldiers. My father, Victor Ward, moved through the room as if he owned the very light. People flocked to him the way moths circle a flame. This was his coronation. I lingered near the back. My brother Jason stood at the center, tall, confident, groomed for a single role, successor. People laughed at his jokes, toasted his name, offered him the future on a silver platter. I had been raised to disappear. Mother, Elena, glided among guests like a portrait, pearls at her throat, a glass of wine as a shield. Her silence had always been her diplomacy. Uncle Harold, the family lawyer, found me by the dessert table. He squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "You holding up, Evan?" I managed to smile. He was one of the few who treated me as more than a footnote. Victor took the stage, and the room obeyed. "Tonight we celebrate the legacy of Ward Industries," he announced, voice steady and proud. He gestured toward Jason. "My eldest son, Jason, will inherit the company, the estate, the jet. He is the future." Cameras flashed, applause crashed, and Jason basked. Then Victor's eyes landed on me. The warmth drained from his face. "And my other son, Evan," he said, "gets nothing." A murmur rose. He leaned in and added with practiced cruelty, "You were never meant to be born. I wish you had died right after you came into this world." Laughter swelled, cruel, collective. Jason's laugh was loudest. Mother lowered her gaze. Years of being told I was a mistake had taught me to move quietly, but the ember of something, anger or a need for truth, glowed in me. I pushed back my chair and started for the exit. A hand slipped an envelope into mine. It was Harold. "Open it when you're ready," he whispered. I could have walked out. Let the night be a theater in which I had no part. Instead, I returned to the table, envelope trembling in my hand. Jason smirked. "Maybe Dad will let you keep the fishing cabin." People tittered. I slit the seal. Inside was a letter on thick stationery embossed with my grandfather's name, Andrew Ward. The first line read, "To my grandson, Evan Ward." My father's face drained of color. The letter contained notarized directives and documents transferring controlling shares of Ward Industries to me upon Victor's retirement. The room inhaled as if the air itself was waiting for the next note. I stood and read aloud. Grandfather's words were precise and purposeful. Not to the loudest, not to the strongest, but to the one with integrity he entrusted the company. As I spoke, Victor's glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble. The sound punctured the ceremony. Faces that had adored him minutes before now searched for answers. Jason lunged, red-faced with entitlement. "This is a fraud," he shouted, reaching for the documents. Harold stepped forward calmly with corroborating papers. "These are notarized and witnessed," he said. "Andrew left these directives. They are binding." Victor's authority cracked. He ranted, "I built this empire." But the room no longer hung on his words. Mother rose and took my hand, whispering, "Your grandfather saw you." Her voice landed deeper than any applause. Guests began to murmur, shifting loyalties like unsettled dust. Standing with the letter in my hand, I felt both vindicated and burdened. The legal transfer was clear. What it meant in practice was a wilderness I had not prepared for. I did not relish Jason's fall. He stormed out in fury, vowing to fight. Victor slumped, robbed of his throne. The spectacle had flipped. Humiliation had become revelation. What I inherited was more than assets. Ward Industries supported communities, employees, and a culture shaped by my father's iron will. In the weeks that followed, I learned the language of governance, board meetings, fiduciary duties, shareholder expectations. Senior executives tested me subtly, seeking seams to exploit. But the documents were airtight and public opinion shifted as the facts stood clear. Uncle Harold became my counsel, teaching me legalities and advising strategy. Mother offered quiet strength. I visited shops and factories, listened to managers, and began to see the human edges of decisions made in boardrooms. My grandfather's letter had not only given me authority, but a mandate. Lead with integrity and compassion. Resistance persisted. Some old guard executives resented change. A few investors whispered doubt. Jason marshaled lawyers and allies outside, his campaign half pride, half despair. He became a cautionary example. Entitlement without empathy corrodes the very thing it claims to protect. I did not seek to crush him. I sought to prevent our shared legacy from being weaponized by fear. I made initial changes that were small but symbolic, reinstating community grants cut for optics, launching internal reviews of workplace practices, and opening channels for employees to speak without fear. Each decision rippled outward. Those ripples were not always met with applause. Some accused me of weakness, others of naivete, but the company's heartbeat slowly shifted. There were private moments that mattered more than speeches. One evening, I returned to the ballroom after most guests left. The chandelier light felt colder. I unfolded my grandfather's letter and read it again. Do not let cruelty define you as it defined your father. The empire I built was meant to lift people, not crush them. The words steadied me in a way no board resolution could have. Victor's decline was not immediate. Power erodes slowly, through legal clarity, public perception, and the steady work of living differently. He retreated into a silence heavy with regret or denial. Jason drifted out of the family circles, his rage turned inward. Mother finally spoke to me without looking over her shoulder. Stewardship taught me patience. I discovered that the language of leadership had to include listening. I sat with foremen in factory break rooms, heard stories of unsafe corners and ignored complaints, and acted. Policies changed. Apologies were made. Actions followed. I could not erase years of pain with a press release, but I could begin to repair. The weeks that followed taught me something unexpected: how quickly the public narrative can rewrite a person. At first, the headlines were messy: Ward heir shock, dynasty dispute, a circus chasing our family. But as I showed up to meetings, listened to workers, and refused to let vendettas dictate policy, the story softened. People began to measure me by actions, not by my father's fiction. There were quiet victories. I reinstated a scholarship fund my grandfather had urged and met the students whose lives would be changed because someone once believed in giving chances. I sat with them and realized the inheritance was never just property. It was the ability to create opportunity. Sometimes I still catch my reflection in the mansion's window and see a man carrying both a letter and a legacy. The weight presses at my ribs in the dark, but it steadies me. The envelope that once felt like a trap now feels like a responsibility I accept with trembling hands and a steady heart. This is not merely a story of vindication. It is about the quieter work of remaking what was built, changing an empire of fear into something that, imperfectly, serves people. It began with an evening that could have ended with me disappearing into humiliation. Instead, I opened a letter and, in doing so, opened a new chapter for a family that had needed it more than any of us admitted.